But on to the topic of today's hearing. It's bad enough that we have all of this funding going towards NGOs that then support radical ideological causes. Sort of the logical next step that we've seen is funding organizations that then directly commit or facilitate criminal activity.
If you've ever watched a congressional hearing and thought, wow, did that member of Congress really just say that out loud? Then buckle up, because today's moment might take the cake. Jasmine Crockett, normally quick, fiery, and more than happy to unload on Republicans, went absolutely speechless when Kiley caught her completely off guard. And trust me, you could feel the room shift. And before we jump into the wild back and forth that unfolded, do me one quick favor. Hit that like button, smash subscribe, and drop a comment anytime you hear something that makes you go, wait, what? It helps the channel out big time, and we've got a whole lot to dig into today. So here's how it all started. In the middle of a hearing that was supposed to be about nonprofits misusing federal funds to push radical political agendas, Jasmine Crockett decided to take the scenic route. Instead of addressing the topic at hand, she veered into a rant about blue states versus red states. Because of course she did. According to her, blue states are basically the financial life support system for the entire country, while little red states ain't contributing nothing. That was the tone. That was the energy.
Seems like blue states are constantly putting red states on life support, yet we got these little red states that ain't contributing nothing, but they are definitely taking up a lot of money, you know.
Now, the moment she said this, you could practically hear the political calculators turning on across the room. It was one of those statements that sounds bold until you realize none of it is actually true, and that's exactly where Kiley stepped in. Not aggressively, not theatrically, he just calmly said, "I want to briefly address a comment," and then proceeded to absolutely dismantle every claim with a surgical strike of cold, hard facts.
I want to briefly address a comment that the ranking member, the representative from Texas, made about my state, California, claiming that our state gives disproportionately to the federal government and is some sort of donor state. Actually, the state of California gives nothing to the federal government. Individuals and businesses do pay taxes.
California isn't sending anything. Apple is, Google is, small businesses are. And when Governor Newsom made a comment implying the state should withhold its dollars, Kiley reminded everyone that such a move would amount to, wait for it, criminal tax evasion. Not bad for a state that's supposedly on the moral high ground, right? But the real twist came when Jasmine tried to use Los Angeles as the shining example of why blue economic leadership is superior. She opened with, LA contributes almost $20 billion in taxes, and said it like she'd just uncovered buried treasure. According to her, that means LA should basically be allowed to steer national ideology because it contributes more than all these other states.
Earlier, someone mentioned these hellholes, talking about the cities, right? Talking about cities being hellholes. I just want to point to Los Angeles. I'm sure that's one of the cities they were referring to when they said that. Los Angeles contributes almost $20 billion in taxes. You know what? That's more than all states in this country except for 4. So guess what? If we are going to push any ideologies, it seems like LA should have an outsized interest in the ideology, because it seems like they actually contribute more money than all these other states, especially these red states, to be clear. In fact, I have another UC.
Without objection.
All right, blue states are bailing out red states. I have another UC.
Without objection.
Massachusetts sends more funding to the feds than any other state. It seems like blue states are constantly putting red states on life support, yet we got these little red states that ain't contributing nothing, but they are definitely taking up a lot of money. You know, it is interesting because the governor in California, I don't know if you caught this, but Governor Newsom was talking about just holding on to his dollars, because California is what they call a donor state, meaning that they actually contribute more than they take from the federal government.
Kiley didn't just poke a hole in that argument, he popped the balloon entirely. He pointed out that if LA is the gold standard, then yikes. Because the numbers had just dropped that same day. LA's homeless population is over 72,000. The police chief has literally warned residents not to wear jewelry in public because muggings are that common. The city is laying off over 600 workers because the finances are falling apart. And oh, don't forget the riots, the vandalism, the wildfire mismanagement after the fire department was defunded. Just a small detail.
I do want to briefly address a comment that the ranking member, the representative from Texas, made about my state, California, claiming that our state gives disproportionately to the federal government and is some sort of donor state. Actually, the state of California gives nothing to the federal government. Individuals and businesses do pay taxes, and Governor Newsom's suggestion that we should withhold those taxes, as our Treasury Secretary has pointed out, is threatening to commit the felony of criminal tax evasion. As to this notion that Los Angeles is somehow a model of good governance, just today, Los Angeles came out with its new homelessness numbers. The current count is 72,308. The police chief in LA has formally advised people not to wear jewelry when they go outside because they will get mugged. The city just announced 614 layoffs because the finances are such a mess. And this is to say nothing of the recent riots and the catastrophic wildfires that came after the mayor defunded the fire department.
So yeah, if that's the example of good governance, then we might need to redefine the word good. But let's rewind for a second, because here's where Jasmine's whole argument really falls apart. She wanted to frame tax contributions as a matter of red state versus blue state. But that's not how taxes work. What does matter is population size, number of large businesses, presence of federal facilities, military bases, age demographics, actual measurable factors. And when you break it down like that, California's numbers don't look magical. They look predictable. More people plus more businesses equals more tax revenue. It's not some political revelation, it's basic math. But here's where the hearing took a sharp turn back to what it was supposed to be about, because Kiley wasn't about to let the clock run out without addressing the actual topic: left-leaning nonprofit networks using federal tax dollars to push radical agendas, and in some cases facilitate criminal activity. Yep, criminal activity. And this is where things get spicy. He brought up CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles. Now, if you're just reading the name, it sounds harmless, sounds noble even, but according to recent reports and testimony, their activities have been raising all kinds of red flags.
But on to the topic of today's hearing. It's bad enough that we have all of this funding going towards NGOs that then support radical ideological causes. Sort of the logical next step that we've seen is funding organizations that then directly commit or facilitate criminal activity. And this is exactly what we saw with respect to the recent riots in Los Angeles, where you had a group known as CHIRLA, the Center for Humane Immigration Rights Los Angeles, that played a central role in organizing the riots. They made use of a hotline through Signal where they would inform rioters at any given moment where ICE personnel could be found, so those individuals could then converge, they could disrupt their operations, they could use commercial dumpsters as battering rams, they could assault officers, and so forth. CHIRLA, by the way, has been implicated in other ways in all of the recent chaos that we've seen. For example, the incident where tire spikes were used to disable the vehicles of Border Patrol. The individuals engaging in these crimes were carrying the tire spikes in bags with CHIRLA's name on them.
Now, we're not talking about some tiny backyard operation. This organization received $450,000 in federal funds in 2023 alone. Add up the rest of the grants from the Biden-Harris administration, and you're looking at around $1 million. And that's not even counting the staggering $34 million from California itself, basically making CHIRLA a publicly funded political machine. And despite all that, the cherry on top is that LA's own mayor, Karen Bass, recently proposed giving cash cards to illegal immigrants supposedly impacted by ICE operations. And guess who would be distributing them? You guessed it, CHIRLA. You cannot make this stuff up. Kevin Kiley didn't stop there. He introduced the No Tax Dollars for Riots Act, a bill aimed at making sure taxpayer money can't be used by organizations involved in political violence. President Trump has already said he wants it passed immediately. The House Judiciary Committee has launched a full investigation into CHIRLA's use of federal funds. And keep in mind, the Trump administration had already begun investigating them back in 2020 and even terminated their federal funding in 2025, trying to recover $100,000 in leftover cash.
And to top it all off, Karen Bass's recent proposal to give cash cards to illegal immigrants supposedly affected by ICE operations are being distributed to them by, you guessed it, CHIRLA. So I've introduced a bill, the No Tax Dollars for Riots Act, which will make sure that organizations like this do not continue to get funding, and indeed that they cannot claim tax-exempt status. President Trump has enthusiastically endorsed that bill and said it should be passed immediately. On top of that, this committee, the House Judiciary Committee, has opened an investigation into Chirla's use of the federal funding that it received during the Biden administration. It also received $34 million from California, accounting for the vast majority of its revenue. It's effectively a subsidiary of the state, or a subsidiary of the sanctuary state, if you will. So, with all that being said, Mr. O'Neill, or if Mr. Gonzalez or our other witnesses would like to chime in on this, how problematic is this that we now have these public taxpayer funds being used to directly facilitate criminal activity?
So now comes the real question. How did this hearing, meant to investigate nonprofit corruption, turn into a debate over state taxes, and then veer right back into riot funding? Answer: because Jasmine Crockett tried to derail it, got hit with a fact-check freight train, and had no way to recover once the numbers came out. And that leads us to something bigger. We've reached a point where politicians would rather toss out viral-sounding talking points than deal with the messy reality of what's happening on the ground. Whether it's failing city governance, skyrocketing crime, or nonprofits running political interference with taxpayer dollars, it's easier to blame little red states than to address why LA is falling apart. It's easier to shout donor state than to explain how a city contributing billions can still be completely incapable of keeping its residents safe. Politicians love sweeping metaphors about states giving life support to other states because it sounds dramatic, but the truth is far more complicated and far more inconvenient for the narrative, and that's why Kevin Kiley's takedown hit so hard. He didn't show up with opinions, he showed up with receipts. So now I want to hear from you. Are these nonprofit networks a genuine threat to accountability and public safety? Should taxpayer dollars ever be used to fund groups involved, even indirectly, in riots? And what do you think of the so-called donor state debate? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Seriously, I want to see how the audience feels about this one because it's a lot to unpack. And if you're still here watching, make sure to hit that subscribe button because this channel is growing fast and we want you with us as we keep breaking down the stories the media glosses over. The more you comment, like, and share, the more YouTube pushes this content out, and the more we can keep bringing you these deep dives with zero spin and zero filter. Thanks for watching and stay tuned, because if Congress keeps dropping moments like this, we're going to have a lot more to talk about.